How's Tricks? It's episode 6. Today I'm going to continue on again slightly from yesterday, where I mentioned friendship. I mentioned how I'd made a new friend in Ivor, and hopefully, and presumably in Anthony, who rejoins me this evening, and hopefully, many more to come. But in relation to friends that I've had for a while, and even new friends, like here's one for you, and the reason that it's sprung to mind is it's just 6 o'clock in the morning now, and I'm just after finishing an hour and a half long jiu-jitsu rolling session. Yeah, so he met me down here at 4:30 in the morning, before we both went to work to our respective jobs, and I wouldn't be down here at 4:30 in the morning doing jiu-jitsu without cheap. Partly because it's not you kind of have to do it in pairs, so you can't really do it by yourself. So that's obviously partly the reason. But another more important part is that if I didn't turn up, he would have been here at 4:30 in the morning, and I would have been the biggest bollocks in the world, leaving him hanging basically, having had him get up for fucking nothing effectively, and vice versa. If I rocked up here at 4:30 and he wasn't there, he would have made a bollocks out of me. So there's an element of kind of giving each other a dig out, which I think is necessary, because there's days I don't want to fucking meet him down here and do jiu-jitsu, because I'm too tired and I'm too sore, and maybe I'm just not in the fucking humour. And I'm sure he has the fucking same feelings, as we all do. So it's so important to have friends around you. And again, like I know Sheep a long time, but he's my brother's mate, really. Like, myself and Sheep have only been doing this rolling once a week for the last, 4 or 5 weeks. But progressively we're becoming better friends all the time. And your friends, if they're not like-minded people, they fucking should be. Now, they shouldn't be the same as you. Like, Sheep is very different to me, and as I am to him. But there's plenty of a crossover there that makes it work. And to give another example, there's another mate and past guest and friend of the show, Desmond Seperate. Myself and Des go swimming once a week. And again, I no more want to fucking jump into a freezing cold fucking lake once a week and, in inverted commas, swim around for fucking 10 minutes. Swim, aka not drown. I don't really want to do that. It's not particularly enjoyable. I enjoy having done it. In a sense, it's kind of like a workout, even though it's not that physically taxing. It's mentally taxing. It's a mental workout. But there's no fucking way I'd be jumping in and out of a different lake every week on my toga. You need someone to almost not to let down, but to not let down. And that's, in part at least, the utility of friends. It's how we push ourselves, I suppose. It's and again, incremental steps. It's once a week. Like I'm teaching David a bit of jiu-jitsu. Like he was an absolute beginner, having never done it before, a month ago, and now he'd annihilate himself on his first day. Absolutely tear him to fucking pieces. Like, he's just a completely different fucking animal. Now, he's still pretty shit because he's only done it, 4 or 5 times. And if you think that you're going to get proficient at anything by, trying it with a friend of yours once a week for, 4 or 5 weeks, fucking forget about it. You'll get a good grounding in it if the person teaching you isn't an egotistical maniac and isn't just tapping you all the time and is actually genuinely trying to encourage you to learn. And again, that's the beauty of jiu-jitsu. The better you can make your training partners, the better you become yourself. The saying, as the saying goes in martial arts generally, steel sharpens steel. So you need and again, like the podcast, you need somebody to hit the ball back to you. There's only so much that you can do with yourself. And realistically, like, going through life by yourself, that's a fucking recipe for depression and all the other horribleness that comes along with depression. Your friends are a lifeline, or at least they should be. But I think too many people, including myself in years past, view your friends as people to do enjoyable things with. To go out with the weekend with, or to have the crack with, or to, send jokes back and forth via text message. And look, I'm not saying you shouldn't have fun with your friends. You absolutely should. But it's just so important to have friends that challenge you, physically and mentally. Like, there's David now. He's in pretty good fucking shape. Boxing is his bag. It's his shtick. And we've done a bit of a bit of pad work, and hopefully we'll progress to a bit of sparring and maybe join the two and have almost like a friendly MMA sparring session where it starts standing on the feet. You know, nothing. You're not going to try and kill each other. We want to be able to do it. You know, maybe up it to twice a week. Hopefully, we only discussed that this morning. But again, you know, he's kind of half thinking about it, and I'm kind of half thinking about it. But between the two of us, we fucking do it, like. So he's teaching me the bit of boxing, I'm teaching him a bit of the jiu-jitsu, and there's that back and forth, there's that give and take, and that's what it's all about. It's just so fucking important. So maybe ask yourself, you know, who are your friends? Maybe ask yourself, have you got any? Like, and know the difference. Like, there's people you work with, there's your family, there's people, let's say, that you play football with or whatever it is, and then there's people that you've been kind of hanging around with, maybe since school, maybe since childhood, maybe, you know, for the last number of years or whatever else. But are they your friends, or are they, you know, acquaintances? I know the difference. Put it this way: when I was 20, if you had asked me how many good friends that I would have had, I would have said, "Oh fuck God, look, I don't know. Call it 20." And ahead of this recording, I haven't really thought about it, but off the top of my head, you know, it's not 20. It's, you know, I would consider myself very fortunate insofar that I have, you know, 3 or 4. So I'm blessed to have 3 or 4, and you're fucking blessed if you have 1, because if your friends aren't, you know, a lifeline, like if they're not progressing you toward a better version of yourself and you them, what are they? If they're not that, it doesn't mean that they're something negative. It doesn't mean that they're something bad or something that you could get rid of. But just try and, I suppose, quantify who they are and what they do for you. And if you have no one in your life that's kind of pushing you or helping you excel in some form, or at the very least challenging you, maybe address that, because life's too fucking difficult to go it alone. And you can have all, you know, the acquaintances and pals and, you know, colleagues and teammates. You can have all of those things and have them in spades. But if you don't have a friend, or ideally friends, actual people that want to see you do well and will do whatever they can to aid in your own betterment, and are hopeful that you will do likely to them, if you don't have those people, that's something that you need to address, because life is too fucking difficult to go it alone. So in keeping with people who motivate you and keep you going, I want to move on, I suppose, to motivation itself. Now again, in a perfect world, I'd sit down and I'd plan this out and map it out and give it to you succinctly and in a way that everyone would really understand it and get it, and you'd be motivated maximally for the rest of your fucking life. But that's not going to happen, so I'm just going to spitball and see if I can get out the sentiment of what I'm trying to explain. This is the work of a scientist or psychologist called Jaak Panksepp, I think is his name. Fuck knows how you spell that. But he basically discovered the play circuit in the mammal brain. So it's widely accepted and well known that mammals engage in what we humans would call play. So if you've ever seen a nature program of, you know, baby foxes or lion cubs or even bear cubs, they play. It's obvious that they play. They almost wrestle, in a sense. And rats do that. So rats have been observed in the lab playing away, and they wrestle. And what Jaak Panksepp discovered, amongst other things, was that a rat will work to get the opportunity to enter an arena whereby he knows play will take place. So they will work, again, a kind of a human-esque thought that you would actually do something to achieve something else. But rats will do that. So rats are motivated to play. But the thing about rats playing is, if a rat, I think has a 10%, if a rat has a 10% weight advantage over another rat, it means that he'll win, 9 times out of 10. He just has that significant weight advantage to pin his opponent. And the way rats wrestle, apparently, is that very similar to where humans wrestle. They try and get into a dominant position and pin the rat's shoulders, for want of a better word, to the mat, to the ground, and that's a victory, and the reset. But if you put a rat that has, let's say call it a 15% difference in weight, so they're 15% heavier, which means that they're just going to win all the time. What will happen is, if that rat wins all the time, the smaller rat, who's usually the rat to instigate the play, it's usually the smaller guy, if he keeps getting beaten, let's say 9 times out of 10, he'll stop asking the bigger rat to play. So, bearing that in mind, the bigger rat appreciates this and doesn't continually pin the little rat. Which makes you it kind of poses the question of ethics and morality. Maybe they're not the best words, but you might get the sentiment. There's an element of fairness amongst rats when you think about that. And then you think about how religions have told us that, God came down and told us how to act in the world, and we need religion in order to treat ourselves fairly. Rats in a fucking cage know how to play fair, basically. So that there's food for thought in that, if nothing else. But anyway, I'm getting away from the point slightly. What has this got to do with motivation? Well, what Jaap Panksepp realised was that there's essentially 2 ways to be motivated. So the idea is, you have a rat in a cage, and let's say it's a starving rat, and you waft in the smell of rat food, whatever that is, and you have a spring attached to its tail so you can measure how hard the rat pulls on this string to get to the food. Now, the rat is starving, say. The rat is going to die if it doesn't get food, so you could say that it's maximally motivated to get food. So it'll pull and pull and pull on this little spring that's attached to its tail to get to the food. And it's pulling with all its might. It's maximally motivated. It's fucking starving, and there's a smell of food around the corner. So it's pulling and pulling and pulling with all its might. You might say that it's fully motivated. But you waft in the smell of cat odour, and bearing in mind that rats are instinctively terrified of the smell of cats. You waft in a cat odour from the opposite direction of where the food odour is coming from, and the rat will pull all the more. And what that proves, now look, he explained this in a lot more detail than I'm explaining it now, okay? This is the dumbed down version that I can understand and can try and relate to. But again, as always, get the sentiment. Now, don't be worrying about the details of any of the things that I say. Once you get the point, once you get the sentiment, that's all that really matters. That's the important stuff. So what that essentially explains is that there are 2 motivational systems. One of them being your approach systems, which is there's food around the corner. Where's the food? And it's exploratory. So you're looking for something. You're actively going after something. And then the other one is, I suppose, if one is an approach system, the other is, I suppose, maybe a defense system. It's like, fuck, what's behind me? Got to get away from it. So it's not flight or fight, but it's flight and find in a sense. So again, what the fuck has a rat being terrified of a cat and starving to death got to do with you motivating yourself in your daily life? Well, the take-home point is there's 2 modes of motivation. So you want to say, we'll stick with losing weight, because that's a kind of an easy one for people to, I suppose, to understand, even if you don't have any weight to lose. But think about it this way. You say to yourself, right, what's the motivation to lose weight? What are the motivations? Well, you need an approach. So you need something, you need a goal, you need something to strive for. So you say, if I lose a load of weight, I'll look a lot better, and I'll feel better about myself, and I'll be able to buy clothes that are a bit more fashionable, say, or whatever your motivation is. And that's something to that's a goal that you want to achieve. And let's say even add in seeing the needle not go as far up the fucking scales as before. That's a motivator. That you might be maybe more sexually attractive to people. Maybe that's another motivator. So these are all things that they're goals to strive and achieve. They're things that they're wants. They're things that you are going to go out there and go after and get after it. But there's another motivation, and that's the downside if you don't. So if you don't address your overweightness, odds are you're getting heavier. So this time next year, like I would imagine that a lot of overweight people would love to only be where they were last year, say. Because if you're an overweight person, it means that you've been putting on weight for years, probably. And why would you think that that process would stop? If anything, it's accelerating and getting worse. So if you're overweight and you're not addressing it, odds are that you're getting heavier all the fucking time that you don't do anything about. So even doing something about it, addressing your diet or maybe incorporating a bit of exercise, don't get disheartened if you don't lose the weight, because at least you're not getting fucking heavier. But anyway, I digress, as always. You need something to be worried about, basically. So the food, in the rat analogy, the food is the goal. It's the six-pack that you want, or it's the the hole in your belt that you want to fucking, the next hole in the belt that you want to get. The new clothes that you're going to have to buy. Maybe you're going to sweat less when you're fucking walking to the bus, or whatever the fuck it is. They're the food. But what's the cat odor? What's the fear? The fear is you're going to die of a heart attack. The fear is you're going to get diabetes. The fear is, if you're a man, women won't want to have sex with you at least as much, and and vice versa. If you're a woman, the man would, or whatever. You'll be less sexually attractive. The fear is you're getting bigger progressively. The fear is, you're going to sweat more when you have to run for a fucking bus, or you're running for a taxi, or whatever. Maybe you won't be able to play with your kids as long as you would like to, or maybe you're not going to be able to play with your kids at all. But they're two separate motivating systems. The fear of something and the goal of something. And I may be reaching with this, but again, the sentiment kind of hopefully rings true. It's a heaven to strive for and a hell to avoid. And there's wisdom in that. What that wisdom is, I'm not that sure. It's something that I'm going to devote a bit more thought to. And again, like all the different topics that I mentioned to you guys, I'd love to hear your feedback on them. On them generally, or on them specifically. You mentioned this one tiny little thing. Can you explain it a little bit to me? Because I need that. I don't have the guest here. So if you're listening to this, you're the guest, essentially. So it's incumbent on you, the listener, to hit the ball back to me. Because otherwise it's just some guy fucking chatting away to himself. And it's not as if I don't worry about making these recordings. Like, it's a bit weird, to say the fucking least, okay? And it's by no means normal. And that's okay. But put it this way, like, I got a mate of mine text me only yesterday, Kevin Booth, past guest and friend of the show. Cheers, Kev. He had some words of encouragement for me yesterday, and some suggestions, and a question for Anthony, who's going to be back on this evening from Mythical Ireland. But getting his text message and reading it, it kind of made me go, okay, right. People are, they're getting it, they're enjoying it. You're not gone completely insane. Because I can assure you the thoughts that I have do genuinely cross my mind. I also heard from two separate mates, one this morning and one yesterday, and both these lads are doing fucking push-ups, and thanked me for basically just, I don't know, fucking giving them the bit of a boot up the hole to go and fucking do it. Now, they're not going to end up entering a fucking push-up competition and winning it. They're not, en route to break the world push-up record. But they're doing it, and hopefully they're enjoying doing it. And hopefully at the end of the 40 days, they might even have noticed a difference in themselves. Or maybe they're enjoying it. Or maybe they'll incorporate fucking sit-ups. Maybe they'll do 20 or 30 or 100 sit-ups a day for the next 40 fucking days. Because, as I keep relentlessly getting back to it, this idea of incremental improvements, bite-sized chunks. Take fucking one day after the next, because you're going to be 50 at some stage, or maybe you're going to be 60, or maybe you're going to be 70, depending on what age you are now. You're going to be that age. And again, a guy called Aidan that I've trained with a small bit in the jiu-jitsu, he got into jiu-jitsu at a much older age, say, and the advice that he gave my mate Patter, who has since started it, Pat O'Reilly, previous guest and friend of the show, the advice that he gave him, or what he said to him was, Patter, you're going to be 50 someday. Why not be 50 with a black belt? And the wisdom in that isn't why not be 50 with the black belt? The wisdom in that is that you're going to be 50 at someday. So you're going to make 50 at some stage. Now, that might mean a whole pile to you if you're 65 and you're listening to this. But if you're 65 and listening to this, guess what? You're going to be 75. What do you want to be when you're 75? Like, do you want to be a 10-year older version of you now? Or do you want to be a completely different fucking person? Because, look, it's your life. Live it however you want it. Like, you're in control of your own destiny. Like, you're captain in the ship. No one else will be to blame, and no one else will take credit. Or no one else should be to blame, or no one else should take credit for who you are now, and, who you want to be and who you will be. Like, that shit's on you. It really is. Look inward. Look at yourself. Look at yourself in the fucking mirror and try and assess the situation. And look, maybe the situation isn't great. Maybe you look at the mirror and you kind of... Maybe the sight of yourself depresses you, because I've been there. I've been so fucking low that you wouldn't even look at yourself in the mirror. Least alone take a long look, because the sight of yourself just fucking disgusts you. And that might be for a very good reason, or it might be for no reason at all. Because again, you create your own reality. If you think you're a shithead loser, you're a shithead loser. You think you're a fucking legend, fair fucking play to you, you're a legend. Like, there's this, and again, I haven't travelled enough to know or to say whether or not that this is an Irish thing, but there's this saying that I've heard so often, that guy is and this is meant in a very derogatory sense, that guy, he's a very high opinion of himself. Like, Jesus Christ, if you can't have a high opinion of yourself, how are you supposed to expect anybody else to have a high opinion of you? Maybe you don't want somebody to have a high opinion of you. Maybe you don't want to have a high opinion of yourself. Maybe you're, weak and mild and timid and nothing, essentially. And maybe you're happy out, pottering through life and, not challenging yourself and not challenging others. And look, if you're thriving, if you're, sleeping well and living well and all is good in your world, fucking fair play. But one thing to watch out for is tragedy and disaster, because that's coming. If you haven't experienced it, watch the fuck out. People who have experienced it know exactly what I'm talking about, and people who've come through that are the stronger for it. And I know people who are, I suppose, essentially soft in a sense, because they just haven't had that tragedy or that dark night of the soul that strengthens you if you can come through it. Now, it's not pleasant, but guess what? It's coming. If you haven't experienced it and you think you're kind of soft and weak, watch the fuck out, because shit like that will take you down. And that's where friends come in again. When you are down, when you have been knocked on your ass, and you're struggling to get up, and you're struggling with, you're around with your missus, or you're around with your kids, or you haven't spoken to your parents, or your boss is a wanker, and you've got all this negative shit in your life. That can be too much for even a strong person, let alone a weak person. And that's where your friends come in. And that's when you'll spot the difference between acquaintances and friends. Because I've loads of acquaintances, don't get me wrong, and I don't care for their shit, because I've got enough of my own stuff. And you can't take on the problems of the world. You can and should take on the problems of your friends. But you can only have a handful of friends. And if you think you've got 20 friends, you don't know what friends are. And if you think I'm wrong, watch the fuck out. Especially if you're 30 plus. Like, if you're in your 20s and you still think you've got 20 friends, okay. And definitely if you're in your teens, you probably should have 20 friends, because, life is fucking rosy when you're a teenager. At least it should be for the most part. And if it's not, the only thing that's going to pull that out of you is, friends and family. Because friends and family, as you kind of go through life, that's all that matters. That's all there is. Everything else is just window dressing. Everything else is just, crack down the pub, or crack after the game, or funny text messages on WhatsApp, or whatever it is. But your friends and family, that's where That's where real friendship and real bonds and real progression and real progress is made for you as an individual, and for them as an individual, and for you and your unit collectively as a group. So maybe you're listening to this and you're like, Jesus, I don't have any friends. Or maybe you're listening to this and saying, God, I haven't spoken to my only friend in years. So maybe take this opportunity to fucking reach out to someone. Maybe send someone that you haven't spoken to in ages a text and say, listen, you on for meeting up? Or, and this is the hard thing, because like the podcast has been a great excuse for me. I've been sitting down and having 3 and 4 hour long conversations with people, and it's been fascinating with blind strangers and with friends for life. But even Padder, I mentioned him in the last podcast. There's photos of myself and himself having a bath together in the kitchen sink back in the day. But up until we sat down and recorded our first 4 hour podcast, we hadn't sat down and spoken like that, like ever really, and we're the closer for it now because of it. So the podcast has been a great excuse, and I don't know offhand what the equivalent of that is for most people, because realistically most people aren't going to set up their own podcast. And look, if you're thinking of setting up a podcast and you want to know how to do it, contact me. I'll fucking tell you, it could not be fucking easier. If you can set up a username, if you can set up an account online, so if you know how to generate an account on a website using a username and a password, that's about as difficult as podcasting gets. And I think I mentioned it either in the last one or the one before, that what you're listening to on this has been recorded. I was about to say edited, but it isn't edited. It's been recorded and uploaded, and the image attached and all the text and all the rest of it, that's been done from my mobile phone. And I've said it again, it's a Samsung Galaxy S7 or something like that. But look, if it's got a voice recorder app and access to the internet, that's essentially all that you need. So look, maybe you can reach out to a friend of yours and say, listen, I'm thinking of starting a podcast. Would you be willing to sit down and hit the ball back? Maybe you've no intentions of setting up a podcast. Maybe it's just a ploy to have a fucking couple of hour conversation with someone. Because it's a great excuse to get somebody to set aside a couple of hours and to turn the phones off and to not be interrupted. To say to herself or himself or whatever your situation is, listen, I'm going into this room and, if do me the fucking favour of, not interrupting me for a couple of hours or whatever. Set it up so that you've got a couple of hours fucking peace that you can talk to someone. Because if nothing else, you'll find out what you end up talking about. Like, what are you going to talk about? What would you end up talking to your best friend about if you sat down to talk to them for 3 or 4 hours? Like, what kind of ground would you cover? Would you talk about, I don't know, termites or soccer or computer screens or tech or religion or sex or porn or fucking what, like? And the exercise of sitting down and chatting to someone and seeing what comes up, like that's indicative of, I suppose, what's going on in your head. And when I think back of all the different topics that I've covered, if that tells me anything, it tells me that my interests are wide and varied. And that tells me a little bit about myself, I suppose. So there's learning in that. There's being aware of who you are, because I think a lot of us, myself included, up until relatively recently, and it's something that I'm continuously going to work on, not only do we not know our mates, our friends say, we don't know ourselves. And that's something maybe to think about. Maybe I don't know, jot down a quick paragraph of who you are. A friend of mine I was chatting to him recently about Tinder. Tinder being this mobile hookup app thing. Now, that'll tell you exactly how much I know about Tinder. But it's basically a Facebook profile account that you put up there as a single person, and everyone else that's on it is single, and you basically try and match up with people, for friendship or maybe a little bit more or whatever. And what's really interesting is my mate was telling me about the different kind of bios that you see. So you've got, you know, a space for, I don't know, maybe 200 characters or whatever it is. So you have to write a little bit about yourself. And he was saying that it sickens him to see the amount of people that say, you know, live in Dublin, have brown hair, and I'm 5'11". And you're like, Jesus, that's, you know, that's your opinion of yourself. You know, tell the world, you know, what you're all about. I live in Dublin, my height and my hair colour. And like, they're obviously not all that bad, but some of them are a lot better, but effectively just as bad. Big United fan, love going out. Jesus. So bearing that in mind, maybe pull out your phone and write a message to yourself. Just jot something down. Use your, you know, your Keep app or whatever note-taking app you have, and if you don't, you should have one, or maybe a voice recorder. But basically, write down your Tinder bio. Write down 2 or 3 sentences that essentially summarises you. I'm going to do it actually, and I'll probably post it. I will post it. Fuck it, I'll post it. I'm going to put a timeline on it, because if I don't put a timeline on it, I'm going to say that I'm still working on it and I want to perfect it. So fuck it, I'm going to do it today. I'm going to write, not my Tinder profile, but I'm going to write and post on Facebook. Bite the bullet, the fuck. I'm going to write and post on Facebook, I don't know, a 2 or 3 sentence synopsis of, you know, who I am or what I identify as. And I'm going to sign it off as being a work in progress. So, I'm dishing out homework all of a sudden. Look, give it a lash and fucking send it on to me, either via email or in a comment. I'm going to post it on Facebook and on Instagram, and maybe write yours in the comment if you're brave enough. Maybe write yours as a comment if you're brave enough. If not, just do it yourself. Or maybe message me with what yours is, or maybe message me with what thoughts came to mind and what you learned about yourself when you put pen to paper. And